Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Scruffy Movies podcast. I'm Zach Wallace.
And I'm John Crocker.
And today we have a very interesting one for you because, honestly, Crocker and I don't really know where it's going. We're going to start the conversation talking about the amazing television show Stranger Things, which I know isn't a movie, but we're branching out from our normal stuff to talk about something a little bit different. But we might start talking about 80s movies, 80s shows, nostalgia, childhood, but basically it's all wrapped up in this nice little package that starts with the TV show Stranger Things, of which the third season just came out, and Crocker is about halfway through, and my wife and I actually watched all of it in one day. So huge Stranger Things fans and really excited to start talking about everything and just kind of see where the conversation takes us today.
Yeah, Stranger Things, it took the world by storm. I would have never guessed if you totally put me in a vacuum where I could not see how the rest of the world reacted and showed me Stranger Things season 1, I would have said that's awesome. Somebody should totally recognize this as being awesome, but I would have never assumed it would have just totally taken over like it did.
Yeah. And I remember seeing too, because I've been checking the movie website that I always check for my movie news and stuff is joblo.com. And I've been checking that website pretty habitually. I've been checking it since I was probably in the 7th grade or so. But then like habitually, like every few hours, I'll just hop back on to see if there's any new movie news or anything. Probably for the last, since I was about a freshman in college and had like my own phone that could connect to the internet and my laptop that could connect to Wi-Fi and stuff. I've been checking it habitually, like every couple hours, every day, I'll check it. And I remember seeing a few years back an article pop up that was like, hey, some new pictures from the Winona Ryder's Stranger Things TV show. And I was like, what is that? Huh? And I clicked on it, and I remember reading like a quick little plot synopsis, and I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. I'll check that out. And then like you said, just kind of took the world by storm. I remember watching the first episode whenever the season 1 released, and just the first episode, the hour went by so fast that at the end of it, I was like, these are like 30 minutes. And I paused it and it said like 55 minutes or whatever it was at. And I was like, oh man, wow, that went by super fast. Yeah, this is going to be a good show.
Yeah, they fly by probably better than any other TV show. I mean, those hours go by so fast. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact, all right, and I'm just going to go ahead and jump into this. It's probably my favorite thing about Stranger Things, and it correlates, is that they do an excellent job, if not the best job I've ever seen, at having that many characters and actually not feeling like any of them get left behind. And even if it's just like little check-ins here and there, just to remind you they're still in the world and they're still off doing this thing or whatever, like they do a most excellent job at keeping the pace moving forward for everyone. And they've always done that. And we've talked a lot on this podcast specifically about, you know, movies like Star Wars and the Marvel franchise and everything else, where that's probably the first thing that I notice is when someone just gets left behind, or I feel like they're spread too thin, so no characters were able to develop. And Stranger Things really hits the nail on the head, and they have since season 1 at having a crazy amount of people that you care about that are telling the story. And somehow they can check in with all of them and keep it moving forward and not feel like anyone's, you know, being spread too thin or being sacrificed for, you know, the greater story or anything along those lines. And they'll introduce new people just out of the blue. They'll kill people off. Like, they do a great job at sort of keeping it rolling. And that probably is my number one compliment for this show, is to prove that it is possible, even though I know it's a show, not a movie. They've set the bar. So now I expect media in general to step up.
Yeah, and that was honestly one of the praising points that I had for my favorite show of all time, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. that was a show where people would come on to do a guest spot. Like they thought they were only going to be in one episode. And then either the writers, the producers, the fans liked them. And then so they brought them back, did a few more episodes, and then they turned into a main character. Like there is one character specifically who is a main character throughout, I wouldn't say main, and he's more recurring in season 6, and he's a main character throughout season 7, and then the continuing Buffy lore past that through all the different seasons that they had in comic books and stuff. His name is Andrew, and he was actually just a write-in character because they were going to have somebody else come back who had been on the show previously, and they just couldn't get the actor back. So they created a new character called Andrew, which was this guy who appeared in one random episode's little brother. And he was a bad guy at first. He killed people. He did all this stuff. And then they basically kidnap him, and he's like their prisoner at their house. But then he eventually starts to turn to the good side and stuff. And he becomes a main character. Like a guy who was in one episode's little brother becomes a main character on the show because people just liked his character so much that they gave him like a storyline where he changed from bad to good and was able to see like the error of his ways and stuff. And Stranger Things does a really good job with that too. Like if the fans say they really like someone, perfect case is Lucas's little sister, Erica, who was in, I think, one scene in Stranger Things 2. That was it. And she just called him a nerd basically. And like, that was it. But the audience loved her. So now she's a main character in this season. Like there's just so many good and easy ways. And that's what I've always thought. I always hate when shows like feel like they're missing something. So they pull from outside of their resources that they already have. Like when Charlie Sheen was fired from 2.5 Men and they hired Ashton Kutcher instead. There's already so many talented people in that cast. Like just promote one of them. Like let's just figure this out. Same with that 70s show when Eric left and they pulled in Josh Myers to play a new character. I was like, you've already had Seth Green on this show, like all these amazing people. Why not just up one of their characters to a main cast member? And then we already know them and like them and they're established and let's just move forward. So I really like that Stranger Things does that. If they like the person or feel like they have more story to tell, they're just like, great, main character. Let's tell more story then. I really like that they don't just kind of forget people or it doesn't fit into their main plan. So even though you do like them, they're not really in this season because we wanted to do something different. I love that they actually listen to their fans and like take feedback and then adjust their story because of that.
Yeah, totally. And I feel like that's something that we see a lot in today's world, especially with the business side of show business coming through and people leaving and, dropping out of shows mid-season and all that. I feel the same way. When they bring someone new in, it's like I see what you're doing and I respect the attempt, but at the same time, yeah, why step over the people that we already have? Because most of the time and most of the popular shows or movies or franchises out there are plenty other background characters that could be explored. Now, obviously, that's not true for every scenario, but I feel like for the vast majority, it is. And I think something that we used to get talking about the 80s, something that happened in the 80s a lot more than it does now, is actual spin-off shows. Like where, Andy Griffith probably had like 4 or 5 spin-off shows that came from it. Yeah, a lot, now that's older than the 80s, obviously, but that trend is something that we saw pretty often until recently. And I know there's been a few over the past decade or so, but they're few and far between.
Yeah, I see mostly a lot now, instead of just spin-off shows of like an already established property, you'll see like sequel series to a series that's ended a few years back and things like that. Like they bring them back for new stories with like a twist on them where instead of the main character that we know, now it's their kids that are the main character and they're like kind of tertiary in the background. That happened with Girl Meets World, Raven's Home. Like all these shows are getting sequel series instead of spin-offs and stuff. The only ones I know that do get kind of spin-offs now And even spinoffs isn't really the right term, it feels like, but they're like the bigger franchise shows, like the Defenders on Netflix, but they were basically already established as like, we're going to do all these shows, then do Defenders. The only true spinoff to come from that franchise, I think, was The Punisher, because they put him in Daredevil season 2, and people just liked him so much that they were like, okay, yep, show for him. And they went, oh, okay. And they gave him his own show.
Yeah. I mean, I know that kicking it way back, Cheers, that spun off to
Frasier.
yeah, and Laverne and Shirley too, right?
I don't think Laverne and Shirley. I think Laverne and Shirley was a spinoff of like Mork and Mindy or something weird like that. Or Mork and Mindy was a spinoff of like Happy Days. So maybe Laverne and Shirley was a spinoff of Happy Days. But yeah, I think it was definitely a spinoff.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was a spinoff. But I thought Cheers was responsible for more spinoffs than that.
Laverne and Shirley was a spinoff of Happy Days.
Yep, the Google confirms.
Yep, I just Googled it.
Me too.
Happy Days also spun off, along with Laverne and Shirley, Blansky's Beauties, don't know what that is, Mork and Mindy, Out of the Blue, and Joni Loves Chachi. So like 5 out of one show.
Yeah, that was the thing. It was, oh, here's a character that was a side character or would come in for the occasional episode, was a passing love interest, whatever it was, and enough people loved them that they were like, oh, well, we'll just take that basis and give them their own show. We already have their history. We already know their background. The audience is already, familiar with them, at least enough to sort of get a footing and move forward. And maybe it's just that, honestly, today, there really isn't that many like sitcoms that would sort of warrant sort of those passing individuals that would, get their own show. I feel like nowadays we've suffered the wrath of reality TV, and that's really the majority of what comes on TV in the afternoons or night now, with the rare exception of something like Stranger Things. But even then, that's sort of on Netflix, and it kind of falls into the deep, dark hole of everything you can watch on Netflix, and it's not like a every Thursday at 7 p.m. thing like Big Bang Theory and all those were sort of the dying ember of, at least I feel like.
Yeah, and I think that now too, we're having like another golden age of TV, of just like amazing shows coming out. Those shows that spun off they were serialized, like they had through stories, but a lot of it was basically like, hey, tune into Happy Days this week and see what Fonz and the gang are up to. Like there wasn't a lot of crossover between episodes previous, And I feel like now audiences are so committed to the binge watch or to just watching shows and being so caught up in the story that there isn't a lot of like need for spinoffs, because there's not like, okay, we only have so much time to tell this story. This character's really good. Let's tell his story over here, because now like audiences are committed. Like in previous times, maybe Stranger Things would have had like a Dustin and Steve spinoff because they are such good characters and actors and work so well together. They would have had that. But now instead it's like, well, they're committed to this. Instead of kicking out these two characters that we really like, let's just bring the story that what would have been their spinoff show and keep it in this season and just stretch the season out 2 more episodides. And everyone's like, okay, yeah, we're good with that.
Yeah, and you bring up a really, really impactful point there, the binge worthiness and the way we consume shows now with Netflix and Hulu and everything else. Stranger Things in particular, I do not think would have really worked well in the traditional TV medium. Maybe on like HBO as like a short HBO series or Showtime or something like that. But talk about through story, through plot. Like if you come in the middle of a Stranger Things season, good luck even trying to conceive what possibly could have happened in the episodes leading up to that. Like they don't even give you enough to like latch on to, and it's just so outlandish sometimes that there's no way you would envision it anyway. And I think the majority of the awesome shows that you hear about, people talking about and everything else coming from those platforms, are all set up that same way, where they are I mean, Stranger Things could basically be an 8-hour long movie per season. It really could be. You could go sit down and watch it all in one sitting and it not feel like a TV show, or at least not feel like a traditional TV show in my mind.
And that is exactly what happened. Thursday, the day it was released, I believe at around 8 a.m., my wife and I started watching, and we kept watching until about 3:30. We just watched every single episode. And I kept thinking to myself, like, this does seem like a big movie. And then I kept also thinking, man, how would they be able to do this in movie form? You know, you said before we started this podcast that you were about 4 episodes in, and that's 4 hours. So that's more or less an hour plus. If a movie is hour and 30 minutes long, that's already 2 movies plus the majority of another movie. And as soon as you said I'm 4 episodes in, I said, oh, good. So stuff's just now kicking off. Like, there's no way they could tell this in just a movie format of, hey, here's a quick, even if it's like a 2.5-hour movie, hey, here's a quick 2.5-hour movie. We're still missing 5.5 hours, 6.5 hours of content that, like, no, I want it. give me the 8-hour movie. And it really does feel like a movie. It flows like a movie. There's storylines through, there's character arcs that flow through every episode. It feels like just a long movie.
Yeah, and it's not in your face with the whole like 3-act thing that's, you know, specifically separated by commercial breaks, you know, and it feels different. And honestly, dude, I think it is by far the superior delivery method and the superior, method of making these shows. Like, I would absolutely love if they came out and said, okay, instead of doing another Star Wars trilogy, you know, even like main canon big Star Wars saga, I know that's a whole other topic, but if they came out and they were like, saga continues, but instead of doing another trilogy of movies, we're going to do a trilogy of 8-hour long seasons, 1 season a year for the next 3 years, and they give you that much content and it's produced to the level that the movies would be produced to, and you get the opportunity to see that much more. Oh my goodness, sign me up. I don't care if you never make a movie again, you know, as long as, because in the end, I'm getting more content that is up to movie level quality. Like, especially now, I don't feel like we sacrifice anything going to sort of this show format versus a movie, especially considering that they're made to be binged anyway and watched, you know, in quick succession. So I would totally be happy with that. I think this is by far the superior method. Give me 8-hour long Star Wars movies, 3 of those, call it a trilogy, and I'll be happy.
I'm such a nerd that you just presented the hypothetical situation to me of an 8-hour season of a Star Wars trilogy TV show coming out once a year for the next 3 years. And I could feel my heart like flutter a little bit. And I got excited over a situation that like is not happening at all right now.
I know. I gave myself chills just talking about it.
I was like,
think about that. Like, how awesome would that be?
I know. I was like, oh, I'd love that. Like, I was, as you were saying it, I was like, oh, that'd be good. Oh, that'd be good. And I guarantee you that the day it came out, I would do exactly what I did for Stranger Things season 3 and sit down with my wife and watch all 8 hours in one sitting, because it's basically a big movie. It's the same to me as it was one of the reasons why up until Harry Potter 5, I read the books before I watched the movies. And then through Harry Potter 6, and not through Deathly Hallows because that was the last one, so I had to read it. But I guess basically just through 6. And kind of now, this is what I like to do. Whenever a media property, TV show, or movie is based off of a book, I don't like to read the book first. Hunger Games is another great example of this, because the book is filled with so many more details and characters and character motives and like all this stuff that you can't put into a movie because you just don't have the time. So instead of reading this like super awesome story where I feel like all of these things are incredibly detailed and important because they are to the book, whereas in the movie or TV show, they might change some stuff around or like take some stuff out. or like put their own things in to kind of make sense of why they took out like this third, but it makes sense because they put in their own thing to connect this half to this half. And so now instead of reading a book before I watch a movie, I just watch the movie, have that experience, and then if I want to, I go back and read the book, because then it's like, oh wow, look at all these awesome deleted scenes and things like that that I'm getting a chance to look at. And I think Stranger Things works a similar way of they just couldn't the shows as they're showing them now are basically the books. And there's just no way that they could just do like a movie format off of that. They need that ground and that story to be able to tell. And I think that's one of the reasons why people are so captivated by this show, is instead of just spending 2.5 hours every 2 years with these characters, we're literally spending 8 about every year. And we're learning more about them. We're getting more invested. And I think that's another reason why TV shows are starting to kind of take over a little bit more than they have been before, like with Game of Thrones and Walking Dead and Breaking Bad, all like top 5 list TV shows of people of the last 10 years. And those are all shows as well. Like you can't just pop into Breaking Bad season 4, episode 10 and be like, all right, let me just see what's going on. You'd be completely lost.
Yes. Which it lends itself to the downside of this format a little bit, which is rewatch ability for sure. Like I've never gone back and rewatched the entirety of Stranger Things season 1 or 2. And I probably will not go back and rewatch Stranger Things season 3. It is too much of an investment to go all the way back through them. Like there's so many other shows and movies on my list of things to see that if I sat down and think to myself, what am I going to watch right now? It's anything that would require that large of an investment totally gets taken off the table. And the good thing about movies is that occasionally you find yourself like wanting something to watch when you're not really paying attention to the TV or have background noise or, something along those lines. And those movies that you've seen 100 times, you can just throw them on. And I suppose you could do that just as easily with TV shows that you've seen 100 times. But that sort of insinuates that you've actually sat down and rewatched them all that many times to begin with, which would be a monstrous, commitment of time. So that's the only real downside I see. Now, if it was Star Wars, I'd watch them all, 10 times backwards, forwards, left and right, you name it. But I'm probably not going to do that with something like Stranger Things. I love Stranger Things, but I don't love Stranger Things.
See, I love Stranger Things because, and this is where we can kind of open it up to, I guess, more like 80s stuff in general, but Stranger Things for me is, and I wasn't even born in the 80s. I was born in 1992, but Stranger Things for me is like watching people that I can directly relate to, like people who want to stay in the basement and play D&D, or hey, let's go sneak into a movie. Let's watch Day of the Dead. Let's watch Back to the Future. Like they're obsessed with these movies. They're obsessed with Star Wars. They're obsessed with all these nerdy things. And it's literally like me personified on the screen, and it just connects with me so deeply. And Stranger Things is also super good about, which is one of the things that Big Bang Theory caught a lot of flack for, and deservedly so. Stranger Things will drop a reference, and like if you get it, you get it. If you don't, you don't. Like they'll drop a reference to something incredibly weird or obscure in D&D or Star Wars or something like that. And if you don't get it, then you just didn't get it. Whereas Big Bang Theory would be like, wow, you look like Yoda. And then have somebody else be like, oh, from Star Wars? Which one? 4 or 5? And they go, oh, 4. And they're like, haha, Yoda wasn't in. And like they explain it to the audience. They're like, haha, it's funny. They're nerds because they reference Star Wars. Whereas in this and another TV show I really love, Chuck, are really great about it. They just drop references a million times an episode. And if you don't get it, you don't get it. Like there's a character who you've been introduced to, Crocker, but I don't think he's yet gotten to his full width as a character this season so far. He is one of basically like the bad Russian military guy, like the big bad guy. They do so many things with him in this season where he looks exactly like the Terminator from Terminator 1. He looks like Schwarzenegger's original Terminator T-800. He looks like him. He talks like him. His storyline is a little bit like the Terminator's. And every time they would do something, I'd be like, ha, like the Terminator. But they never explain that to you. If you don't get it, then you don't get it. And that's one of the reasons, like, I love this show. They are making nerd characters, but they're not making fun of them. Like, you like these nerd characters, you relate to them, you enjoy them. They make references the way I do. Whereas in Big Bang Theory, it's kind of making fun of nerd culture of like, haha, look how nerdy they are. They love Doctor Who, those weirdos, you know?
Yeah, I think what I would require to really dive that extra level into Stranger Things is a spin-off series. No, but something, I don't know what it could be, but I want to know like more information. Like, they gloss over so much, I feel like, and they do it on purpose. It's meant like, you know, you're not supposed to have the answers. You're not supposed to know all the motivation behind, you know, this creature or whatever it is. You're not supposed to like understand how it works. They specifically leave a lot of that unanswered because it totally lends itself to the suspense and everything else. But I kind of want like that behind the scenes. Like, I want someone to explain all of the things and this, like, get deep into the lab and get deep into what these creatures are and where they come from and what their motivations are and why they need the host and what the whole host ultimately does for them, and like the difference between season 1 and season 2 and ultimately season 3, and like, go back and tell me more about 11. Like, let's actually dive deeper on that, because I feel like only really scratched the surface in season 2. Like, there's so much that I feel like, me personally, I feel like it's sacrificing the greater story and the greater world to make it a more suspenseful show, which ultimately probably makes it more popular and gets more views. And not everybody's as nerdy as I am and wants to know the story. But I could, if they gave me something to latch my teeth into, I would gladly accept it. And it would probably make me a much larger fan.
Yeah, and I mean, they go in, now they're starting to release books that are set within the TV show where you can kind of get a lot more of that information. Like, I know the first book is actually set around Eleven's mom trying to break into the lab and like figure out what's going on with Dr. Brenner and like all this stuff right when they first begin their like test with 11 and all this stuff. But I honestly think, and they're kind of learning a little bit from their brethren from 80s franchises. There have been 3 movies in each of the big horror movie franchise that I know of, in Halloween, Friday the 13th, and Nightmare on Elm Street, and they're later. They're definitely not like in the first ones or anything. They are Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare, Jason Goes to Hell a little bit, Jason Goes to Hell, and then Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers, which is Halloween 6, all go in depth of trying to explain why these monsters do what they do, why they're monsters, why they want to kill people, why they want to do this, why they want to do that. And literally, those are some of like the worst reviewed movies out of all of those franchises. Because at the end of the day, it is cool to learn about that stuff. Like, let's learn about the Demogorgons and stuff like that. But once you learn something about them, it starts to kind of take away the terror a little bit. You're much more scared of the faceless stranger than you are of somebody who, like, even kind of like, well, that guy's name is Roger. You know, like, that guy's not a total stranger. That guy, I have no idea who he is. He freaks me out a little bit. Even though they could be wearing the same thing, same exact outfit, but you know one guy's name, it immediately makes you less scared of that guy than the other guy. And so I think they're pulling some really smart punches of like intentionally not telling us that stuff. Like, they keep giving us little more tidbits more and more throughout the seasons, but like the Demogorgons and stuff are much scarier as just like, oh my God, here's this monster again. Like, we barely fought it last time, and it cost 11 basically her corporeal life for that for a few months, whatever it was, that she was just stuck in the upside down, or I guess it was a few minutes for her, and then she came back out. But like, there's so many things that we don't know, and I kind of don't want to. Like, Zach, the person who enjoys the storyline, would be like, yeah, cool, I want to know those things. But Zach, the guy who's like watching this for entertainment, kind of doesn't want to, because I understand that once you tell me that, I'll be immediately less scared.
Yeah, again, I totally get that, and I see that, and I understand that's the decision they made for. Oh, was that? I mean,
that means it's halftime.
Woo-woo.
So if you haven't listened to the show before, halftime is the part of the show where Crocker and I take a break from the conversation we're having, and we talk about recent movie news, movie trailers, things we're excited about. It's also been the part of the show where we're giving away a free digital copy. We're continuing that this week with another DC animated movie, Suicide Squad: Hell to Pay, which is a really awesome Suicide Squad movie that just came out, I believe, last year. So if you want to be entered to win that one, all you got to do is enter the code word DEADSHOT below on the YouTube video you're watching right now, or direct message me at Scruffy Movies on Instagram. Again, the code word is DEADSHOT, and you'll be entered to win a free digital copy of Suicide Squad: Hell to Pay.
Is that another one of those animated?
Yes, it is, and it is rated R.
Nice. All right. So I've seen a few trailers this week that I'd like to mention.
Okay.
So I'm going to start with one that I think you actually mentioned last week, and if so, I'll breeze over that one. Stuber?
I did not mention that one last week.
Okay. I remember us talking about Drax at some point.
Yeah.
But so basically, I still am not 100% sure what the backstory is with the character, but it boils down to what looks to be a buddy cop comedy between Drax and
Kumail Nanjiani.
What's his name?
Kumail Nanjiani.
That's the one, who is a Uber driver, or whatever Uber is in this movie universe. The movie is called Stuber. And I don't know if Drax is an actual cop that just has to take an Uber, or if he's like impersonating a cop, or if he's a spy, or like, I have no idea what the story is, but it looks hilarious. And anything Dude Buddy's in, I'm willing to give it a shot.
Yeah, it looks really funny. I'm very excited for that one. I love Dave Bautista and Kumail Nanjiani, and this one looks really good.
The next one on my list is one that surprised me a little bit, which is called Spies in Disguise. I'm sure you've seen the trailer for that.
With Will Smith?
Will Smith and Spider-Man?
Yeah, Tom Holland.
That's the one.
Yeah.
It's very much of a, what I would call an Incredibles style, like, animation. Like, the characters look like they were pulled directly from the Incredibles universe. So I'm sure there's probably some connection there, and just sort of that art style in general, be it a person or I don't know. I don't think this is coming from the same studio, but either way, it's pretty much a spy story by the looks of it, with Will Smith and Tom Holland, but with a little bit of mad scientist flair mixed in there. I'm not sure if I know that they end up, well, the trailer shows Will Smith turning into a pigeon, is, the in disguise part, but I think they wind up swapping bodies at some point too, and like doing some, just getting up to no good, getting into shenanigans as spies. So that looks pretty awesome.
Yeah, I saw the trailer for that. I'm not extremely excited. It's an incredibly strange story, and one that I don't know. If they would have showed more of like them switching bodies, or like he's a bunch of different animals, or he's like an animal and then like he's a tree, or like all kinds of just weird stuff, I feel like I'd be more into it. But the fact that they were just like, you're a spy and now you're a pigeon, is just incredibly weird. And I'm not looking forward to that one, really.
Something about the animation style and like that brand of humor, which, I'm a huge Will Smith fan. Like,
yeah.
In general, just everything he's ever done, I'm a fan of. So this tickled the bone in my body that likes The Incredibles, and it may have gotten me like, I may be too excited about this. It may end up being a terrible movie, but I'm hoping that it's going to be like a standout animated film of the year.
Yeah, it could be. I would say like probably 3 times out of 5. I have a pretty good gut instinct, just because this is what I like, of being able to like watch a trailer or do something and be like, oh, I don't think that movie's going to be very good, or I think that movie's going to be pretty good. But a lot of times it could just be the marketing. So I'm wrong a lot of the time that I'm like, oh, that movie looks terrible. It could actually end up being super good. So just by me saying I don't think that movie is going to be very good doesn't really mean anything other than the fact of I don't think it's good. I don't think it looks very good right now. But I mean, it could be. You never know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like I said, it got me excited. So we'll see. We'll see if it ends up being any good. The next one I had down is Framing John DeLorean, which is reportedly a documentary on John DeLorean, the guy that designed a bunch of muscle cars, but specifically the namesake car, the DeLorean, as you probably recognize from the Back to the Future car. And ultimately, there's a big story about some shenanigans that happened in his life and sort of between drugs and money and everything else. So the movie's called Framing John DeLorean. I don't know if it's more of like a documentary or if it kind of looks Hollywoodized just in general. Like it did not at all present itself as being a strict documentary. It presented itself as being a like sort of action-y movie you would go see with a little bit of comedy in there. So it looks super Hollywoodized to me, but anything that has to do with car people, I'm excited about. And there's been a lot of that recently with like the Shelby movie and everything else. So hopefully this trend sort of continues, but we get more into away from documentaries and into like specific races or cars or something a little bit more interesting to me.
Yeah, it looks like I'm looking at the poster for it right now, and the poster says documentary reenactment, true story of the man behind the car. So it looks like it's going to be part documentary, part reenactment.
Hollywoodized.
Yeah. Yeah.
Totally. And then the last thing on my list is a film called Jacob's Ladder, which really just like when it was one of those where you go on YouTube and all of a sudden you're presented with a trailer and you're like, oh, I don't recognize this as one of the same 4 trailers that YouTube serves me over and over and over. And I watched it and I want to see the movie. Like I want to see what's going on. Ultimately, it appears to be some sort of a horror movie where this guy's brother comes back from the dead. And or at least he thought he was dead in Iraq or Afghanistan or something like that, and then comes back later, and then there's demons, and the demons are following him, and it just looks incredibly scary, but at the same time, it looks like a typical run-of-the-mill, like second-rate horror movie. Like you get 5 or 6 of those every year, and this looks like it falls totally in that category, but for some reason after I got done watching that trailer, I really just want to see this movie. Like I really want to know what this is about. So
yeah, it's actually a remake.
Is it?
Yeah, of a movie that came out I think in the 90s, if I'm not mistaken. I've never actually seen the original, and I haven't seen the trailer for the remake, so I don't know what the differences or anything is. But I did see a few people from the Instagram horror community kind of that I follow a lot of people from were saying like, oh, this looks terrible. Why would they do this? But I mean, that's could be said for any remake. There's always going to be people who want to detract from whatever remake is being made because they like the original so much.
Yeah, when I got done watching that trailer, I was like, this looks horrible, but I kind of really want to see it.
There are movies like that. Like there's a few like when I watched the Geostorm trailer, I was like, well, this movie looks terrible. I have to see it. Like there's just movies that are like that.
Totally. Hopefully this one will not be terrible though.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's all I got for halftime today.
That's it. Well, for my halftime, I'm starting off with the trailer that I was the most excited for, which is Jumanji: The Next Level, which is Jumanji 3. And I actually think I talked a little bit about this on halftime last week because we ended up filming it on Monday, but looks super good. Can't wait for that. Walking Dead comics have just come to an end abruptly at issue 193, have just come to an end out of nowhere.
Like the story just wrapped up out of nowhere, or they just stopped producing magazines out of nowhere?
Yeah, they had already announced like 194 and 195, and then like 2 or 3 days before 193 was released, Robert Kirkman, who has made all the Walking Dead comics since issue 1, was like, Yeah, 193 is the last one.
Huh.
Yeah, he was like, I really wanted to make it to, I think he said like 300 or something like that. But he's like, the more we wrote, the more we understood that it was just coming to its logical conclusion. So we just ended it.
So it appears to be coming from the writer himself. It's just like there was no more story to tell, as opposed to some bean counter or executive saying rabble, 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 and it getting stopped.
Yeah, I mean, was like a huge selling comic, and I'm sure it's probably dipped a little in the last couple of years from the huge surge in popularity it got from the TV show, like initially. But I still think it was probably a pretty good selling comic. So there would be no really reason to end it unless the writer himself was like, I don't want to do it anymore. And they were like, okay, are you sure?
I mean, in today's world,
Yeah.
what comic would be more popular? I mean, that's like the only comic really, other than like maybe the Darth Vader comic right now, that actually gets attention, I feel like.
Yeah. Besides Marvel and DC stuff.
Yeah, but those are even those are basically sequestered to the hardcore fans. Like me and
Yeah.
you are pretty damn hardcore Marvel fans. But when's the last time you went to buy a Marvel comic?
Yeah. I don't like ever read comics. I used to when I lived in North Carolina. The library there was super good about getting in like the volumes of graphic novels, which would be like the last 5 or 6 issues collected into one. And so I would stay current on storylines just by going in there and like renting those. Every time a new volume came out of a story I was interested in, I would go in, grab it, read it. But then I moved here, and the library that we have here sucks. So I don't keep up with them anymore at all.
Bro, it's been over a decade since the last time I went to the library.
I probably like a year ago just to check it out and see. And I walked in and I was there maybe about 15 minutes and I was like, sucks. And I just left.
Yeah, I mean, with the exception of school library, back when I had to do school things, I've never just like been to my public library.
Yeah.
What should I check out today?
Yeah. Also, there's a new TV show coming from Danny McBride on HBO called The Righteous Gemstones, which looks amazing. Have you heard of it?
I have not.
So Danny McBride, famous on HBO for doing Eastbound and Down and Vice Principals, 2 of the best TV shows of all time, absolutely hilarious, is now making a show about like a televangelist family who got rich from their dad in the 90s, played by John Goodman, who was like this super televangelist. And now they're all just like these spoiled brats who are like super rich and have to live under the guise of being like televangelist Christians in order to keep their family fortune. And it looks hilarious.
Just the posters alone look hilarious. I see John Candy
John Goodman?
or John Goodman. Yeah, John Candy. John Goodman and God, what's his name?
Adam Devine?
Adam Devine. That's the one.
Yeah. It looks really good. I'm super excited for that. Also another trailer that came out, which I was not looking forward to this movie, but I saw people talking about the trailer and I was like, oh, fine, I'll check it out. And it's a movie called Knives Out, which is from Rian Johnson, who made The Last Jedi. And because of what he did in The Last Jedi, I was like, I don't care. I don't want to watch it. But then I saw everybody talking about this trailer and I was like, oh, fine, I'll check it out. And it actually does look pretty good.
Dude, you're blowing my mind right now. Because when I watched that trailer, the first like few moments, I was like, ooh, this looks like a really good whodunit. And then when the trailer was over, I was like, man, this is gonna suck. I bet this is gonna blow. And I had no idea Ryan Johnson had anything to do with it. But that makes sense. It's gonna be terrible. I'm calling it right now.
Well,
Flop.
he's made really good movies in the past. Last Jedi was his first like 100% misfire.
Everything past it would be a mistake.
Past Last Jedi?
Yep.
Oh, we don't know that for sure. Knives Out looks good to me, so I'm probably not going to go to the theater to see it, but I'll definitely like give it a Redbox rent.
It's been a lot of like Clue style, in the kitchen with a chandelier type of whodunits recently.
Yeah, Murder Mystery on Netflix with Adam Sandler. That trailer reminded me of that a lot.
The Orient Express came out recently. There's been a lot of this. It's like what's that called? There's like a name for it when one movie comes out and then all of a sudden you get three similar movies. There's a reason and a whole thing behind that.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
I know one term which isn't directly associated with that, but it's kind of similar, is like watershed. Like Jaws was a watershed for summer blockbuster movies. When Jaws came out, everybody started freaking out about how good Jaws was, and it made so much money, and it was at summertime, so everybody was like off of school and all this stuff. So now that's why we have like this huge summer blockbuster season, was because Jaws was a watershed in the summer blockbuster market.
Yeah, because at one point in not so distant history, people didn't even think about the fact that if you run a movie in the summer or right at Christmas when everyone is off of work and out of school, more people go watch it.
Yeah, it makes more money.
Makes more money.
And then finally, and this actually just dropped today, Disney just released a teaser trailer for their Mulan movie, which comes out March of next year. And it looks pretty good. It didn't get me like extremely excited for it, but it was enough to be like, huh, cool. But I have heard from this movie that there isn't going to be any songs in it, like whatsoever at all. And that they also cut the character of Mushu, which was played by Eddie Murphy in the original, her little like dragon sidekick, because they thought that would be like unrealistic, I guess, for the movie, and they wanted to keep it more realistically grounded.
What?
And,
what? What? Mushu made that movie, and the music in Mulan was probably like top 3 in the Disney sort of storybook franchise. Like, I think the music in that movie in particular was some of the more famous bits and pieces.
I agree with you, and even the Jungle Book did an extremely good job of like, they cut every song except for Bare Necessities and Walk Like You, whatever it is, the song that King Louis sings.
I want to talk like you.
Yes, that song. And they were like, well, we cut everything except for like the most important songs. And honestly, I'm okay with that. I understand like if you don't want to make a musical, but there's so many ways, like the song that all the warriors sing like as they're training Mulan and like getting hyped up for the battle and stuff. Why could that not be just like this is just their training song? This is what they sing in order to help ease the sufferings of training.
I'll make a man out of you.
Yeah, it would be so easy to like put that into the movie diegetically and just be like, all right, yeah, this is just what they sing when they're training. It's not a musical, but this is a song. Like, there's just no reason to not include it.
I'm unhappy with these decisions.
Yeah. So the trailer looks interesting, but if that ends up being true, I mean, I'm excited to see it. I'll check it out for sure, but I don't know if I'm going to enjoy it as much as I could have.
I mean, when I was a kid watching all these Disney movies, I remember some of these songs just being like, all right, if they could just make a movie like this without the music, it'd be so much better. But at some point in my life, I just was like, yeah, man, you can't have the Disney movies without the songs.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't know when that switch took place.
I don't know either. But and that's why I was so like surprised and enjoyed the new Aladdin remake, because I was like, wow, they put like all the music in it. Amazing. I'm so happy they did this.
Show you the world.
Yeah. But that's it for me. That was all my halftime.
All right. Well, that wraps it up. Halftime for me as well.
Okay.
So what other new-ish properties are set in the 80s? I mean, when I think of like the way Stranger Things is set in the 80s, the only 2 other things that really come to mind are It, because that, or at least the first chapter, is set like kind of in the 80s. And then that Netflix show, Happen Leonard, which I try and tell everyone about because it's a great show. And it's very much sort of the same way that Stranger Things is, where it just drops in loads of tidbits, about the 80s, and it just brings you back on a nostalgia rush with every scene. But other than those 2, like, I can't really think of many new properties that are set in the 80s. if that makes sense.
Yeah, there's like a bunch of them now. The Goldbergs, which is a TV show on ABC, which is really good. That's entirely set in the 80s, and it's like entire basis is like this is a family in the 80s. It is like a family sitcom, but a lot of stuff has to deal with like them being in the 80s. Like there's an episode where the mom goes crazy, bedazzling things. And there's an episode where like he really wants to see the new Nightmare on Elm Street movie, but his parents don't want him to see it. Like it is all about the 80s. A J.J. Abrams movie, which came out in, I think, 2012 called Super 8, which is super good. If you haven't seen that, you should definitely check out Super 8. Very evocative of Stranger Things and It before those were like Stranger Things and It.
Okay.
So that's really good. And then like Topher Grace's movie, Take Me Home Tonight, was set in the 80s. At least the first Hot Tub Time Machine went back to the 80s. So there's like a big like entire resurgence of like 80s stuff that people just want to see now.
Hang on, did you say the first Hot Tub Time Machine?
Yeah, they go back to the 80s in the first Hot Tub Time Machine.
There's two?
Yeah, are you serious?
Hang on. Maybe I've seen the second one.
Hot Tub Time Machine 2, they go into the future and they meet Adam Scott.
Hang on, I think I did. Yes, I did watch this. Okay. I just forgot that existed for a second.
Oh yeah.
Yes. I Googled it and I'm just looking at all the scenes. Well,
yeah, there's like a big resurgence of stuff.
Yeah, I've seen it around a lot. I'm glad it's happening now. I like the 80s.
I do too. I really like the 80s. There's like a lot of good 80s stuff that I like movies and all that stuff. There was a time in my life when I was like in the beginnings of high school where I just became obsessed with like everything 80s that I could, like Breakfast Club and 16 Candles, Pretty in Pink, Weird Science, like all of those John Hughes movies. I just like became obsessed with them.
Yeah, and it's a good era to explore because like we grew up in the early 90s, but like when I was, however old in like 94, 95, that really wasn't a whole lot different than it was in like 84, 85 because it was just before the dawn of the internet. And before that, things didn't quite move in leaps and bounds, like it does now. Yes. So like I remember seeing bag phones and beepers and like that's sort of the generation I grew up with. But before that, it was pretty much the way it's always been. So when you're looking back in the mid 80s, you're looking at what could just as easily have been our childhood. And I think that captures a large group of people because it captures people as young as us and then people that are a decade and a half older than us too. It's sort of that, it's all sort of relatable because growing up in the late 70s really wasn't that different than growing up in like the mid 80s, but it was like microwaves and sideburns, so it's like it was more of a slow progression that's more relatable, and it takes away a lot of the outs. Like when you just say I'm making this film or I'm making this TV show, oh, by the way, it's set in the woods where there's no Wi-Fi, or it's set in the 80s where there's no internet or anything like that, you get rid of a lot of potential holes that could develop just because of the sheer fact we live in a world where anything can be Googled and anybody can be called and you can always be located. And that's a lot of stuff that I would imagine is a luxury when you actually cut that from the script. And there's absolutely nothing worse than watching a movie that's 10 years old and seeing somebody whip out a bag phone and act like it's the coolest thing ever. Like that, movies from like the early 90s get dated so hard when you go back and watch them. But anything that's set in the 80s will just forever and always be okay. It was Rubik's Cubes and Star Wars.
I think that the 80s was also super evocative of like nerd culture. And especially for me and most likely for you, that was a big thing of like, now like people still made fun of nerds, but they were represented. Like, if that makes sense. Like, there was always a nerd in the horror movie. Like, there was always a nerd. There's a nerd in Dazed and Confused. There's an entire franchise called Revenge of the Nerds, about the nerds just getting revenge on the jocks and bullies. And I also think the 80s had a really good split of like the class system that you're introduced to in high school. Whether or not your high school actually goes by that, more or less, you still know people who fit into those categories. Like the Breakfast Club, perfect example of that. The princess, the basket case, the brain, the jock, the rebel, like, and that permeates through everything 80s culture. And when you're watching a movie, you want these deep characters and stuff, but immediately if you see someone walk up wearing nerdy clothes and they say something super smart, you're like, oh, nerd, got it. And like, I think the 80s really kind of set that up for a lot of stuff, of being able to kind of put characters in certain boxes. And of course, characters always can break out of the box and stuff, but being able to just watch a movie and be like, oh, got it. And like, you can immediately evoke an emotion to that person based off of what they're doing in the movie, what they're wearing, how they're speaking. And that, I think, was really developed a lot in the 80s, once like home video rose and all this stuff, and people really started to like get more into movies and TV shows than they were before, and video games.
Yeah, that was the whole like child troop thing, where for decades and even still to this day, like everything from Magic School Bus to Captain Planet to Power Rangers, like anything and everything where you have like a troop of kids, it always ends up being boiled down to, you know, those same few stereotypes. Yeah. You've always got the black male that's a jock, like the Asian female that's the smart one. There's always like a cripple kid. There's always a redhead, like, you know, and there's always a jock. There's always a nerd. And talk about permeate. I mean, that went really deep. I mean, every Saturday morning cartoon for most of our childhood had those characters, you know?
Yeah. And now, like, even like I could watch a movie tomorrow, and if somebody walks up in a Letterman's jacket, I'm immediately going to go like, oh, jock.
Right.
Like, even if it's subconscious, I'm like, oh, jock, probably a bully, probably going to be antagonistic towards the main character. And they might not be. But as soon as I see that Letterman's jacket, I'm like, jock.
Safe bet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, that's a jock. That's a bully. Or I see someone walk up in like a sweater and khakis, and I'm like, oh, nerd.
Yeah, with pocket protector.
Yeah.
And are always like the weird plaid colors where you're like, I don't understand why anyone thought those 19 colors all look good together.
Yeah, like that's, and the 80s I think really helped establish those characters. And that's another reason why I love Stranger Things, is they established those characters immediately, of like nerd, jock, like this, that, and they immediately establish everybody like that. And then they all slowly break out of those roles. And that's a reason why I love one of my favorite movies, Scream, is it tells you what the rules are and then breaks the rules anyway, and then still adheres to the rules anyway. Like,
right.
Like all of the kids in Stranger Things are nerds. They dress like nerds. They talk like nerds. They like stuff that nerds like, but they're still brave enough to jump into battle, not knowing what's going on, in order to save another friend, you know, like, and then there's Steve, who in the first season was set up to be like this jock, this asshole. And he ends up being like one of the biggest hearted characters on the show. Like he protects all the kids in Stranger Things 2. Like there's a scene in the season finale of Stranger Things 2 where the kids are trying to do a plan and he literally yells at them and is like, I said I would keep you safe, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. Like a jock would never say that before. And so it's nice to see Stranger Things understand these roles that have been set up that we all know, and then like twist them until they're like, okay, there we go. Now we're where we want to be.
Yeah. And this season, we are getting close to wrapping it up here, so I do just want to throw this out there. I felt like for the first time, Millie Bobby Brown's character, 11, I felt like I don't know if something weird's going on with her that's going to be explained later in the plot or whatever, but I felt like she's gone a little backwards in her like character arc. Like at the end of the last season, like she sort of found out a lot more about who she is and where she's from. You get like the badass 11 with the leather jacket and the buzzed head and all that or whatever she went through. And then all of a sudden now it's like, ooh, we can go shopping and I can pick out a style that I like and not Hopper. And I don't know, I feel like she's not, like, her English isn't as well or isn't as good as it was in the other ones. I eat, like, which is just strange. Maybe I've totally forgotten about that fact from the other seasons, but I feel like her character at this point, it kind of had like a bit of a reset for this season. And I'm not knocking it because it's whatever. It's only here or there in the show, but she's a pretty major person for that to kind of happen to. And that's really, and she's just like my favorite ever. Like, I really want Millie Bobby Brown to be the next big thing. Like, I want her to just be a huge actress for the rest of our lifetime. So I just want to see her do great.
Yeah, I think her English is still improving after Stranger Things 2. She could speak pretty well in Stranger Things 2, and she can still speak pretty well in this. I think it's just like gradual improvements because she spent so many years like not really speaking that much. But I don't think she really took a step back or anything. I think that she was like scared to use her powers and stuff in season 2, and then she didn't like know the full extent of her powers. And then her going off and doing that, like, more or less a bottle episode with the other girl, I believe she was number 8, who had also been experimented on in that facility, was like, learn to use your powers. Like, you are so much more powerful than you think you are. Stop being scared. Learn to do what you're supposed to do. And so in 3, it's more of like a personal thing now. Like, it doesn't have anything to do with the powers anymore. She's comfortable with the powers. She can do whatever she wants with them. She understands what her limit is, how powerful she is. And now this one is like more of the personal growth. This one is more like, now that you understand what your powers are, that was like the big thing that was in front, like the obstacle of your life. Now it's up to you to determine who you actually are. Take the men out of your life. Take out your father figure Hopper. Take out your boyfriend Mike. Who are you? Because now you've determined your powers. Who are you as a person? And so I think where last time was more like metaphorical growth of like the powers and stuff, this season is more like personal growth for her.
Yeah, and you never know what's going to change. I mean, when this season started, I didn't really like Hopper that much. I was like, man, Hopper's always been one of my favorites. They've kind of been doing him wrong. He's letting me down. And then during the most recent episode I've watched, he just turned into kind of a badass. So I hope he's on his road back to being the Hopper we know and love. So anything could happen. I'm still halfway through, and I'm probably going to knock the rest out today.
It's very good. I won't spoil the ending for you. I'm just going to say, be prepared to cry.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. And I'm like a baby when it comes to TV shows and movies and stuff like that. It's like one of the only places I actually do cry. Like, I cry in real life very rarely, but like every movie I tear up at. Like, and this one was no exception to that fact. Some crazy stuff goes down in the season finale, and you will most likely not cry, but like at least you'll like tears will well up, or you'll be like, oh, damn, like you'll feel it.
Well, sort of my last thing I was going to say on this, and I hope nobody ends up getting killed off or anything too crazy, because really I feel like we've only got like one more good season before they're kind of like aging out of their roles. I mean, the black kid, what's his name? Lucas looks damn near like a grown-ass man in this season compared to the rest of those kids. So
he's like 17 or something, like 17 going on 18. So he is almost like an adult in societal eyes.
Exactly. So I think that it would totally make sense if they end this season in a way that cannot be continued on, which I don't know if that's what you're alluding to or not. But even if they do not end the season in such a way that it can't be carried on, they are getting to the point where those kids are going to be aging out of these roles, or they're just going to have to get real creative and start addressing new challenges and have it be more of a real sort of, we grow up with the kids kind of situation instead of it just being a moment in time.
Fine with me. Let's go to college. Some of the best seasons of Boy Meets World were when they went to college in season 6 and 7, so I'm cool with it.
That's the prime example of people we grew up with.
Boy Meets World.
And Corey, yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
So I'm cool. I'm good with it. But yeah, I agree. I won't tell you how the season ends, but it does seem like we'll have like at least I would like to see them make it to 5 just because that's like a nice number of like, okay, 5 seasons. But it does they do have their eye on something for 4. And you can tell a little bit by like what the last episode is that there's a little bit story left to tell. I don't really know the direction the story's going to take, but there's still story left to tell. And then whether or not 4 is the last one, I guess, is to be seen. But I'm at least like 90% sure now that there will be a 4.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. Well, on that note.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you for listening to this episode. Hopefully you enjoyed. Did you check out the new season of Stranger Things? What did you think? Let us know. Go to my Instagram page. I got a million new like Stranger Things posts up. Comment on one of them. Let me know that you came from the podcast. What you thought about it. Comment on the YouTube video. Let's just start a conversation. I'm very interested to get opinions on this. Please, if you want to be entered to win a free digital copy of Suicide Squad Hell to Pay, just comment the code word Deadshot on the YouTube video you're listening to right now, or direct message me at Scruffy Movies on Instagram. Again, the code word is Deadshot. Please follow us on Instagram at Scruffy Movies.
And Crockalicious.
And we thank you all for listening, and we will see you next week.
Bye.